Sorry, I have to go. Thank you. That simple moment raises a much bigger question. Why is a city with barely 2,000 Filipino residents suddenly producing crowds that look like an entire nation has arrived? Why are tennis reporters and longtime observers so surprised by what is happening? And why are fans already gathering around the practice courts for a player who hasn't even played her first Cincinnati match? There is something extraordinary happening in Mason, Ohio. And once you understand what is really happening, the numbers may be the least surprising part of the story. Picture the Lindner Family Tennis Center on a morning that should normally be calm. Cincinnati is supposed to be the final quiet stop before New York. It is where players prepare their games before the pressure of the U.S. Open begins. But this year, there is nothing quiet about it. Lines are forming before the gates open. Cameras are everywhere. Fans are gathering around the practice courts. Phones are held high. And everyone seems to be waiting for one person, Alex Eala. She hasn't even started her Cincinnati campaign yet. But somehow, the atmosphere around her already feels like a major event. And this is where the story becomes difficult to explain. Normally, when a WTA tournament suddenly attracts this kind of energy, there's an obvious reason. A huge local community, a massive diaspora, a country with thousands of people living in the host city who want to support one of their own. Toronto made perfect sense. The city has one of the largest Filipino communities outside the Philippines. So when Alex played there and the arena sounded like a home crowd, nobody needed much explanation. But Cincinnati is different. The local Filipino population is estimated to be somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 people. Think about that difference. Toronto's Filipino community is roughly hundreds of times larger. Yet the same kind of energy is now appearing in Cincinnati. And that is exactly what has people inside tennis paying attention. Because the atmosphere is beginning to look strangely familiar. The flags, the chants, the fans waiting outside, the excitement around the practice courts. It looks like Toronto all over again. But the numbers say it shouldn't. That is why this story matters. So let's go back. Because to understand why Cincinnati is suddenly buzzing around a player from the Philippines, we have to look at everything that happened before Alex Eala arrived in Ohio. It started with a breakthrough that many people never saw coming. Only weeks earlier, Alex captured her first WTA Tour title in Washington, D.C. It wasn't supposed to become the biggest moment of her career. But somewhere during that tournament, everything changed. Alex fought through the draw. She battled through pressure. And eventually, she completed an emotional title run. After defeating a former Wimbledon champion, Alex became visibly emotional during her post-match interview. That moment spread far beyond the normal tennis audience. People who had never followed Alex before were suddenly watching. People who didn't even follow tennis were sharing the clip. And that was the first domino. Then came Toronto. And that is where the story became much harder to dismiss. Alex reached the fourth round of the National Bank Open. But once again, the tennis wasn't the only story. The crowd was. The response around Alex became so powerful that even she compared the atmosphere to a Filipino community celebration back home. This wasn't a normal tennis audience quietly applauding between points. It felt different. It sounded different. It looked different. And then her opponents started noticing it too. After beating Alex in Toronto, one of her opponents openly acknowledged that most of the crowd had been supporting Alex. She still thanked the fans for creating such an incredible atmosphere. Think about that. A player had just won her own match, yet she still felt the need to recognize the crowd supporting the woman she had just defeated. That tells you how powerful the Eala effect had already become. And now Cincinnati should have been the quiet chapter, the calm tournament, the place where Alex could simply prepare for New York. There was just one problem. The energy followed her. And somehow, it followed her into a city where the demographics don't explain it. That brings us to Rennie Stubbs. Her name carries serious weight in tennis. She has spent decades watching players rise, fall, break through, and disappear. She has seen hype come and go. She knows the difference between a temporary headline and something that could become much bigger. And when Stubbs talks about Alex Eala, she isn't treating her like a short-term story. She sees Cincinnati as another important test. A chance to find out whether Washington and Toronto were simply an incredible stretch. or whether they were the beginning of something sustainable. And that is the part people should pay attention to. Because regardless of what happens in Cincinnati, more people are talking about Alex than ever before. Inside tennis, there is growing belief that she could introduce an entirely new generation of fans to the sport. And if that happens, Cincinnati may not be witnessing a temporary wave. It could be watching the beginning of something much larger. That is not casual praise. It is not simply another compliment for a young player. It is an experienced voice looking at what is happening and suggesting that the story may be bigger than one tournament. But then comes the uncomfortable part. All of this excitement is building around a tournament that could end very quickly. Alex enters Cincinnati as the 17th seed. She receives a first-round bye, and then she faces either Poland's Magda Linette or Romania's Elena Gabriela Ruse. And neither matchup is guaranteed. In fact, Alex has a losing record against both potential opponents. If Ruse comes through, the history becomes particularly difficult. Alex has never beaten her. Their previous meeting came during the 2024 U.S. Open qualifying rounds. Ruse won that match in 3 demanding sets, and she isn't arriving without confidence. She recently produced a strong comeback in Toronto. She showed that even when a match begins slipping away, she has the ability to fight back. So if Ruse reaches Alex, the challenge will be real. Alex wouldn't just be facing a player she has never defeated. She would be facing an experienced competitor who has already shown that she can turn difficult matches around. Then there is Magda Linette. That matchup looks slightly better on paper. Alex and Linette have split their previous 4 meetings. Alex has won their last 2 encounters, including victories at the ASB Classic and Miami Open. But Linette won their 2 meetings before that. She also has plenty of experience in big matches. And earlier this year, she proved once again that she can rise to the occasion against elite competition. So beneath all those flags and chants is a very real sporting question. Can Alex actually get through? The fans aren't showing up because victory is guaranteed. They're showing up even though they know the result could go either way. And that makes this crowd even more meaningful. This isn't blind support built around an expected win. These people simply want to be there. They want to watch Alex compete. They want to be part of the journey. And somewhere along the way, the final scores become only one part of the story. Hashtag part 2, rewritten script, and there's another reason this Cincinnati moment matters. This is actually Alex Eala's first real appearance at this tournament. She was scheduled to compete here last year, but a shoulder injury forced her to withdraw before she could even begin her campaign. So beneath all the attention, the crowds, and the difficult draw, there's a quiet, personal milestone happening. Alex is finally getting her chance in Cincinnati, and she is arriving immediately after the best stretch of her career. That timing is important, because the past few weeks have been physically brutal. Washington was demanding. Toronto pushed her even further. She played high-level matches almost continuously. The pressure kept increasing. The crowds kept growing. And there was almost no time to recover before the next challenge arrived. Now she has reached Cincinnati. But she isn't arriving completely fresh. She is carrying momentum. She is carrying expectations. She is carrying the physical toll of the previous tournaments. And she is carrying a crowd that somehow decided her journey was worth showing up for. Alex has been open about the importance of staying healthy. At this stage of her career, protecting her body is becoming just as important as improving her tennis. Because the schedule doesn't slow down. The tournaments keep coming. The opponents get stronger. And the expectations become heavier. But the fans don't seem worried about any of that. They're showing up anyway. Some are arriving early. Some are waiting around the practice courts. Some are holding Philippine flags. Others are simply hoping to catch a glimpse of Alex before she even plays a competitive point. And that tells us something about the connection she has created. But to understand why that connection has become so strong, we need to go even further back. We need to understand where Alex Eala came from, because her background completely changes the way you see the story. Alex did not grow up inside the kind of perfect tennis environment that many elite players experience. She trained in difficult conditions. There were courts with cracks. There were gaps in the fencing. There were facilities that lacked many of the resources professional players normally have access to. And she grew up in a country where tennis infrastructure was never comparable to the major tennis nations. Yet somehow, she kept going. She kept training. She kept competing. And eventually, she reached the biggest stages in the sport. That journey makes her rise different. Because fans aren't simply watching a talented young athlete. They are watching someone overcome obstacles in real time. And when people see that kind of journey, they don't just become spectators. They become emotionally invested. They feel like they are part of it. That may explain why the support has become so powerful. Alex has repeatedly spoken about the crowds following her from tournament to tournament, and she often points out that the support represents something bigger than herself. To Alex, it isn't only about one player. It is about Filipino pride. It is about seeing someone from their country competing at the highest level. And perhaps that is why the fans keep following her. They aren't simply watching Alex win tennis matches. They are watching a story they feel belongs to them too. That distinction is incredibly important. A player can have supporters because they live in a certain city, but that support is naturally limited by geography. What is happening with Alex feels different. Her supporters are beginning to follow her. The person is becoming more important than the location. And that is how global sports stars are created. Their audience doesn't stay where they were born. It travels with them. It grows with them. And it begins appearing in places where there is no obvious reason for it to exist. That is exactly what makes Cincinnati so fascinating. There isn't a huge Filipino population here. There isn't a decades-old tradition of Filipino tennis fans filling this tournament. There isn't some massive local infrastructure built around Alex. She has had only a short period of major success. Washington, Toronto, a few unforgettable performances, one emotional breakthrough. And suddenly, fans are showing up in another city. That is not a fan base she inherited. It is a fan base she is building in real time, tournament by tournament, match by match, city by city. And if you think about that for a moment, it becomes even more significant. Community support is powerful, but it usually stays connected to a specific location. Crossover fandom is different. It follows the athlete. It follows the story. It follows the emotion, and that means a potential audience becomes much larger. That is why the next stop matters so much. New York is waiting. The US Open is approaching, and New York has one of the largest Filipino communities in the United States. The difference is enormous. Toronto already showed what a huge Filipino community can do. Cincinnati is showing what can happen even without one. So what happens when Alex walks into a New York stadium surrounded by a Filipino community that is vastly larger? What happens when thousands more people already know her story? What happens when the people watching aren't just discovering Alex, but already understand what she represents? That is the question hanging over Cincinnati, because this tournament may be about one match for Alex, but for the tennis world, it could be something much bigger. It could be the first real sign that the Eala phenomenon is no longer tied to one city. It could be the beginning of a fan movement that travels wherever she goes.